You do not prove your purpose with excitement. You prove it with return. You do not prove your ambition with one powerful morning, one emotional promise, one inspired decision, or one speech about what you are going to become. You prove it when the feeling cools, when the room gets quiet, when nobody is watching, when the work is still plain and you come back anyway. That is the dividing line. The world is full of men who can start with fire. It is starving for men who can continue with law. Anybody can feel powerful for an hour. Anybody can say, "This is the day my life changes." Anybody can be fierce in the heat of a moment. But when tomorrow comes, when the body is tired, when the task feels ordinary, when no applause is waiting, when the first struggle appears, then the truth steps into the room. Were you serious, or were you merely stirred? Consistency is the proof that you are serious. That sentence is not soft, and it is not meant to be, because many men love the image of being dedicated more than the discipline of actually becoming dependable. They love the sound of commitment, the posture of ambition, the emotion of a fresh beginning. But they do not love the unromantic burden of repetition. They do not love the 5th day, the 50th day, the ordinary Tuesday, the quiet morning, the plain evening, the hour when the work no longer flatters them and yet still asks to be done. That is where seriousness is measured, not in the moment that feels powerful, but in the pattern that survives after power stops feeling dramatic. This is why inconsistency is never a small flaw. It is evidence. Evidence that a man still lives too much by weather. Evidence that his standard is still negotiable. Evidence that he is still waiting for emotion to carry what only discipline can carry. A man says he wants wealth, but he saves only when fear gets loud enough. A man says he wants mastery, but he practices only when inspiration happens to visit. A man says he wants peace, but he guards his mind only on the days when anxiety has already done damage. A man says he wants strength, but he trains only when he feels ashamed of his weakness. That is not seriousness. That is reactivity. Serious men do not wait for pain to remind them who they said they wanted to be. They build patterns strong enough to outlast their moods. Understand this clearly. Consistency is not boring. It is expensive. It costs a man his excuses. It costs him his drama. It costs him the luxury of saying, "I meant well," while his results continue exposing his lack of structure. Consistency is the death of romantic self-deception. It does not care that your intentions were noble. It asks what you repeated. It does not care that you had one excellent week. It asks what you became known for in your own life. It does not care how loudly you declared a turning point. It asks whether your hand kept the work moving after the declaration grew old. This is why consistency is one of the most honest judges in the world. It exposes whether a man is truly governed or merely easily excited. And the world is filled with easily excited men. They are moved by speeches, books, sermons, failures, fears, ambitions, and temporary bursts of discomfort. They make vows. They create plans. They feel new. Then life becomes plain again. The body gets tired. The reward delays. The old habits begin speaking softly. The work asks for another day of obedience. And because their whole effort was built on intensity instead of structure, they begin slipping. Then they call themselves unlucky, discouraged, overwhelmed, confused, or still figuring things out. No. In many cases, they are simply undisciplined in repetition. They have not yet become the kind of person who can keep a thing alive after the feeling of beginning has faded. That is why consistency is such a rare and powerful trait. It is proof that your standards are not temporary. It is proof that your desire has been organized. It is proof that your promises have become more than decoration. It is proof that the future has started becoming more important to you than today's comfort. A consistent man does not have to keep telling the world he is serious. His habits speak. His hours speak. His results begin speaking. Even before the larger outcomes arrive, there is already weight in his life because repetition has started building substance under everything he touches. Now let us strike at the heart of the matter. Most men fail not because the goal is too difficult, but because they keep restarting. Restarting the routine. Restarting the budget. Restarting the habit. Restarting the discipline. Restarting the plan. Restarting the dream. Restarting the same self-conversation after every collapse. They are always in the beginning. Always about to. Always getting back on track. Always this time for real. That pattern is one of the most expensive in human life. It creates the illusion of movement without the fruit of continuity. A man may spend years feeling as though he is trying, when in truth he is living in cycles of ignition and collapse. And cycles do not build great things. Chains do. One link, then another, unbroken enough that strength can begin traveling through the whole line. This is why the real question is never only, can you start? The real question is, can you keep coming back? Can you keep the promise on a day that feels ordinary? Can you still do the work when no one would blame you for postponing? Can you keep the budget when the world offers you 10 reasons to feel entitled? Can you remain faithful to the habit when you are no longer impressed by yourself for having started it? Can you carry the standard beyond the point where it feels emotionally rewarding? That is seriousness, because at that point the lower self has lost one of its favorite weapons, the claim that discipline must always feel meaningful in order to be worth obeying. Serious men learn that much of what matters feels plain while it is becoming powerful. A seed does not look impressive underground. A brick does not look magnificent alone. A single disciplined hour does not look like a legacy. A saved amount does not look like freedom. A repeated training session does not look like transformation. A cleanly spoken truth does not look like authority. But all of these things, repeated, become their larger form. The weak man despises repetition because he cannot yet see the future inside the little act. The strong man respects repetition because he understands compounding. He knows that the life he wants will not be built by one grand moment of brilliance, but by smaller acts done so many times that they stop looking small altogether. That is why consistency is one of the purest forms of faith, not vague optimism. Practical faith, faith that says, this matters even today. This matters even if the reward is not visible yet. This matters even if it feels ordinary. This matters enough to be done again. A man who has this faith becomes almost unstoppable because he is no longer relying on daily emotional reward. He is building under law. He is not asking each morning whether his standards still apply. They apply. The hour still belongs to the work. The money still belongs to the plan. The mouth still belongs to truth. The body still belongs to discipline. The day still belongs to purpose. This subtleness is what gives consistency its force. Now let us speak honestly about why so many resist it. Consistency is confronting. It reveals your actual loyalties. If you are consistent in weakness, then you are loyal to weakness more than you are loyal to change. If you are consistent in waste, then waste is not an accident. It is a ruler. If you are consistent in delay, then delay has more authority than your stated ambition. This is why many men would rather not look too closely at their patterns. Patterns remove the perfume from excuses. A man can explain one bad day. He can explain one poor choice. He can explain one indulgent week. But when the same failure keeps showing up over months and years, explanation starts sounding thin. Then only truth remains. This is what you repeat. This is what you obey. This is what truly rules you. So if you want to know what you worship, look at what you repeat. If you want to know what you actually value, look at what keeps receiving your best force. If you want to know whether you are serious, look at what survives the loss of excitement. This is why consistency is not merely a strategy. It is a mirror. It shows you who you really are when the stage is gone. And if the mirror reveals weakness, good. Better to know the truth than to keep admiring a false image of yourself while your life stays unchanged. Now, some will say, but I am not perfect. Good. Perfection is not the standard here. Return is. A serious man may stumble, but he does not disappear. He may lose a day, but he does not surrender the weak. He may make a poor decision, but he does not kneel before shame and let it become a second failure. He returns quickly, cleanly, without drama. This is another form of consistency that weak men ignore. They imagine consistency means flawless performance. No, it means loyal continuity. It means the pattern survives even when the man has a poor hour or a poor day. The chain is not broken forever because one link felt strain. The man repairs it and keeps going. That is why serious people become less theatrical with themselves. They stop turning every stumble into a story. They stop saying, I ruined everything. They stop saying, this always happens. They stop using one weak moment as proof of permanent identity. Instead, they say, return now. Correct it now. The standard remains. This makes them powerful because they lose less life to emotional aftermath. Weak men waste enormous time recovering from avoidable collapses made larger by a dramatic self-talk. Strong men interrupt the decline. They do not let one failure become an atmosphere. This matters because consistency is not only built in action, it is built in recovery. If you can recover consistently, you become far more dangerous than the man who is only strong while everything is going well. A man who stays disciplined in ideal conditions is merely comfortable. A man who can return after disappointment, fatigue, criticism, or boredom is becoming formidable. Life trusts such a man with more because he is no longer easy to knock off center. He has learned how to re-enter order quickly. Now let us go deeper into another truth. Consistency is proof because it reveals whether your identity is changing or only your intentions. A man who keeps saying he is becoming someone new but continues repeating the same old weak patterns is not yet becoming new in any meaningful sense. He has adopted inspiring language, perhaps. He has changed his self-description, perhaps. But identity is proved in repetition. If you are consistently rising early, consistently saving, consistently building, consistently telling the truth, consistently keeping your word, then identity is changing. If not, you are still living under older rulers, no matter how beautiful your plans sound. This is why serious men become less interested in impressive declarations and more interested in durable patterns. They stop asking, how can I feel more motivated? And start asking, how can I make obedience more normal? That is the shift. Normal matters. What becomes normal begins shaping the whole tone of the life. If waste is normal, the future will always be taxed. If excuses are normal, progress will remain fragile. If late starts are normal, pressure will keep owning the weak. But if discipline becomes normal, if beginning on time becomes normal, if the standard becomes normal, if saving becomes normal, if saying no becomes normal, then the life becomes much easier to respect. Respect is another reward of consistency. Not public respect first. Inner respect. A man begins trusting his own hand. He says he will do something, and he watches himself do it. Again and again. The mind records this. The conscience records this. Confidence grows from it. Not the loud confidence of performance, but the quiet confidence of evidence. A man who has evidence does not need as much emotional encouragement because he has memory. He remembers that he returns. He remembers that he finishes. He remembers that he can stay with a thing after the novelty leaves. That memory gives him steadiness, and steadiness is more valuable than excitement. Excitement may draw the line on the page, but steadiness writes the chapter. Excitement may open the account, but steadiness grows the reserve. Excitement may begin the training, but steadiness changes the body. Excitement may produce the promise, but steadiness makes the promise respectable. If you had to choose, always choose steadiness. Excitement is a guest. Steadiness is a builder. This is why consistency is one of the highest forms of self-respect. It says, my future deserves more than my occasional best. My future deserves patterns. My future deserves laws. My future deserves a life in which right things happen often enough to become the tone of the whole. Weak men offer their future scattered gestures. Strong men offer it reliable structures. One is romantic. The other is fruitful. Now, because this is true, you must become suspicious of every part of yourself that is still addicted to fresh starts more than faithful continuation. Fresh starts feel wonderful. They flatter pride because they make a man feel new before he has yet paid the cost of change. But continuation is where the truth lives. Continuation asks, will you still show up when this no longer feels like a new chapter? Will you still obey when no one is impressed that you are still doing this? Will you still keep the promise when it has become part of the plainness of your day? If yes, then the thing is becoming real. So stop asking whether you feel serious. Feelings lie. Ask what you repeat. Ask what survives fatigue. Ask what survives boredom. Ask what survives the absence of praise. Ask what survives after a weak day. Those are the marks of seriousness. Those are the signs that your life is beginning to build under law instead of under mood. And if the truth reveals inconsistency, do not collapse. Do not dramatize. Do not turn one honest discovery into another excuse to delay. Use the truth. Begin reducing the distance between what you say and what you repeat. Shorten the gap. Keep one promise daily. Protect 1 hour daily. Save one amount daily or weekly. Return 1 day faster after weakness. Build one chain long enough that you start respecting it too much to break it cheaply. This is how consistency is born, not through one giant transformation, but through repeated loyalty to what matters. Because in the end, consistency is the proof that you are serious, not the speech, not the vision, not the plan, not the emotional vow made in a powerful hour. The proof is in the pattern. The proof is in the return. The proof is in the law that remains standing when the thrill of beginning has already left the room. And the man who builds that kind of proof no longer has to persuade the world that he means business. His life begins carrying the kind of quiet weight that makes the matter unmistakable. And once a man understands that consistency is the real proof, he begins seeing why so many promising lives remain unfinished. It is not because the people in those lives lacked intelligence. It is not because they lacked ideas, passion, or even desire. It is because they kept treating seriousness like an emotion instead of a discipline. They felt serious on the days when the dream looked bright, when the pain of staying the same felt unbearable, when a fresh plan made them feel powerful, when a new month or a new week gave them the illusion of a clean beginning. But life is not built by what you feel at the edge of a new beginning. Life is built by what you keep doing after the beginning loses its shine. That is where consistency stops being a nice word and becomes a ruthless judge. Because the truth is simple. Enthusiasm introduces you. Consistency defines you. You may impress people with one strong effort. You may even impress yourself with one focused day, one hard week, one season of visible improvement. But the question that determines your future is not whether you can be excellent briefly. It is whether you can be reliable repeatedly. A man who can be brilliant in flashes but weak in patterns remains dangerous only to himself. He will keep seeing what is possible, touching it for a moment, then dropping it because his inner life has not yet been trained to carry ordinary obedience for long stretches of time. That kind of man lives in torment because his potential keeps appearing just long enough to expose what his inconsistency is costing him. Now, let us strike directly at the root of that inconsistency. Inconsistency usually comes from divided loyalty. A man says he wants one thing, but he still loves something that works against it. He says he wants wealth, but he still loves reckless spending. He says he wants peace, but he still loves emotional drama. He says he wants mastery, but he still loves comfort more than practice. He says he wants discipline, but he still loves the freedom to negotiate with himself every day. This is why his life keeps splitting apart. He is speaking one future and feeding another. And because he is divided, he cannot repeat the right thing long enough for the right thing to become powerful. That must change if success is ever going to become more than a private fantasy. A serious man reaches the point where he stops asking, "What do I feel like doing today?" and starts asking, "What does the life I want require today?" That question is cleaner. Harder, yes, but cleaner. It shifts authority away from mood and back to law. Mood is temporary. Law can be repeated. Mood makes beautiful speeches and weak patterns. Law creates plain days and strong futures. The world does not give lasting reward to the man who feels right once in a while. It gives room eventually to the man who can build the same strength into Tuesday, Thursday, and the gray morning when nothing special seems to be happening. This is why consistency is not a personality trait reserved for a few lucky people. It is a trained agreement between a man and his own standards. He decides what matters. He builds his life around it. Then he stops renegotiating the matter every time comfort, fatigue, disappointment, or distraction make an argument. The average man lives in constant internal debate. Should I begin now? Should I save this? Should I let this slide? Should I keep the promise today? That inner debate drains force. It makes the life unstable. The consistent man reduces debate. He decides once and obeys often. The morning belongs to the work. The hand belongs to the budget. The mind belongs to what strengthens. The standard remains. This simplicity is one of the highest forms of power. Now, one of the greatest enemies of consistency is the need for emotional proof. Many men want to feel progress every day. They want the work to keep paying them in excitement, visible growth, praise, and momentum. But real growth often becomes very plain while it is strengthening. The body changes slowly. The craft deepens slowly. Savings grow slowly. Trust is earned slowly. Reputation is built slowly. If a man cannot tolerate the slow stage, he will keep interrupting what could have matured. He will switch plans, loosen standards, seek novelty, create unnecessary change, and call it staying flexible, when in truth he is just unable to endure the ordinary pace at which real things become strong. That is why the disciplined man becomes less addicted to fresh excitement and more loyal to repeated correctness. He learns to respect the plain day. He learns to work when the work feels like work. He learns to save when saving feels unimpressive. He learns to practice when practice feels repetitive. He learns that the value of an act is not measured by how exciting it feels, but by what it becomes when repeated. This is one of the deepest mental shifts in any serious life. The man stops asking, "Does this feel big enough today?" and starts asking, "What does this become if I keep doing it?" That question reveals the hidden power of consistency. A page a day becomes a manuscript. A little money preserved becomes margin. A repeated conversation done with honesty becomes trust. A disciplined hour becomes mastery over time. A guarded appetite becomes strength of character. A routine kept long enough becomes identity. These are not poetic ideas. They are laws. Yet most men live in rebellion against these laws because the early stages look too small to satisfy their pride. Pride always wants dramatic results from modest efforts. Consistency humbles pride by forcing it to respect accumulation. It says, "Do this again, and again, and again." The weak man gets offended by repetition. The wise man understands that repetition is what turns the invisible into the undeniable. And now we must speak of another enemy, one that hides behind intelligence: overthinking. Overthinking destroys consistency because it turns every simple act into an emotional referendum. A man who should simply begin starts analyzing his mood, his circumstances, the timing, the conditions, the quality of the plan, what others are doing, whether this is the perfect approach, whether he should revise first, whether he is truly aligned with the task. All the while, the work sits undone. This is not depth. It is often a refined form of avoidance. The consistent man grows suspicious of all thinking that keeps him from the next obvious act. He values clarity, yes. But once clarity is sufficient, he moves. He does not keep reopening decisions that law has already settled. That is what makes him harder to stop. He is not constantly reinventing himself. He is not always starting over. He is not always in need of a dramatic reset. He is building chains, one day linked to another, one act linked to another, one discipline linked to another. Chains matter because they produce continuity, and continuity creates compounding. The man who keeps breaking the chain may still be talented, but he remains expensive to trust. Even he cannot trust himself fully because he has watched himself disappear too many times after promising great things. But when he begins preserving continuity, something powerful happens. He starts respecting his own word. And self-respect is one of the richest rewards consistency can produce, because self-respect is not mainly a feeling. It is memory. Memory of kept promises. Memory of mornings protected. Memory of appetites denied. Memory of returning after drift. Memory of work finished. Memory of not turning weakness into a week-long drama. The mind records these things. It begins revising its estimate of the man. He is no longer just another person who talks magnificently and fades quietly. He is becoming someone who remains. That memory becomes confidence. Not loud confidence, clean confidence. The kind that does not need to announce itself because it has evidence behind it. This matters more than people think. A man with evidence no longer depends so heavily on outside encouragement. He still appreciates support, yes, but he is no longer starving for it. He has a quieter source of strength now. He knows what he has kept. He knows what he has overcome in private. He knows what he has repeated when no applause was available. That knowledge steadies him. It makes him less vulnerable to silence, less desperate for visible proof, and less likely to abandon the process just because the world has not yet fully noticed what he is building. Now let us move deeper. Consistency also reveals what you truly worship. That is not a phrase people like to hear, but it is true. Whatever you consistently make time for, sacrifice for, protect, repeat, and excuse, that thing has become sacred in your life. If you consistently protect the first hour for your highest work, then your future matters deeply to you. If you consistently spend on what soothes your insecurity, then comfort or appearance has too much power in your life. If you consistently return to resentment, then resentment has become one of your inward loyalties. If you consistently train, build, save, speak truth, and keep your word, then discipline has begun becoming sacred. This is why patterns tell the truth. They reveal what speeches can hide. The weak man fears this truth because it strips away his image. He can no longer say, "I value this," while living in total contradiction to it. He can no longer pretend that one occasional effort cancels weeks of disobedience. He must face what is actually repeated. This is good, hard but good, because until a man sees what he is actually repeating, he cannot change his life intelligently. Once he sees it, however, he has a real starting point. He can stop flattering himself and begin reforming himself. And reforming always starts by making the desired behavior easier to repeat and the undesired behavior harder to reach. This is where many fail, because they rely entirely on willpower. Willpower matters, but it should not be forced to carry the whole structure by itself. The serious man also uses design. He arranges his mornings. He prepares his work. He limits access to what weakens him. He creates order in the environment. He decides in advance what gets money, what gets time, what gets energy, what gets no vote at all. This design makes consistency more likely because it reduces the number of moments in which weakness gets to bargain for power.